the important aspects of the scenario discussed by Kurzweil, Bill Joy, by Steve Wozniak, and even Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, we're never going to have any individual freedom again, and our lives are going to pay for it, because we will be, as it says right here, superfluous and either exterminated or kept as they reduce our population. That is a vision that's been put in place, of course, as I said, by the Fabian socialists, by the technocratic elite from the early 20th century and the end of the 19th century. These are both H.G. Wells' books, The New World Order, The Open Conspiracy. This is, of course, Brave New World and Brave New World Revisited, which foresees a technocratic elite, which conveys a Ford-like assembly line production of human lives, total dominance over reproduction, division of labor into a caste system, and most of all, a distracted population which enjoys being drugged up and put forward bred in circuses, but who have no real meaningful distinction over their own lives. And that's really the key that we're talking about. Also among these elites are Bertrand Russell, his very key book, The Impact of Science on Society from the early 1950s. I'm going to read you several of those quotes, and you'll see why the rise of the machines is not the only problem we face. The rise of the elites over 100 years ago in our modern society is something we must face, or we'll have no control regardless of what the computers do in the future. Bertrand Russell, from The Impact of Science on Society, 1953. Although this science will be diligently studied, it will be rigidly confined to the governing class. The population will not be allowed to know how its convictions were generated. I just read you the same conclusion from Edward Bernays in Propaganda, 1927. Bertrand Russell also writes that it is to be expected that advances in physiology and psychology will give governments much more control over individual mentality than they have today, even in totalitarian countries. Fitch laid it down that education should aim at destroying free will. Fitch is one of the followers of the 1800s era, Hegel. Hegel, who basically reduced humanity's importance to a simple cog in the machine. Now that we face the rise of the machines, it's more important than ever what the elites had in mind when they decided that individuals would be a mere cog in the machine. More from Bertrand Russell. Gradually, by selective breeding, the congenital differences between rulers and ruled will increase until they become almost a different species. Just as people like Kurzweil predicted that in the age of spiritual machines, basically the elite and the others who can afford to keep pace will eventually merge with technology, where they may somehow have a co-equal role. But again, ordinary people would be reduced either directly in numbers or kept. Now, going on for Bertrand Russell, a revolt of the plebs would become as unthinkable as an organized insurrection of sheep against the practice of eating mutton. That's right, we're going to be pets, we're going to be sheep, and they believe there'll be nothing we can do to fight back against the society. Furthermore, Bertrand Russell writes, one kind of education will be given for ordinary men and women, another for those who are to become holders of scientific power. And what will happen in this society of carefully managed economic, social, and political factors, where regional governments are formed, where varying regions are merged together under United Nations-style agreements, GATT and NAFTA agreements, IMF, so on and so forth. Much of Europe is controlled by the Office of Economic Cooperative Development. Bertrand Russell writes that a rogue individual would be forced to join or die the Borg hive. And that's part of this important question. He writes, on those rare occasions when a boy or girl who has passed the age at which it is usual to determine social status shows a marked ability as to seem as an intellectual equal of the rulers, the youth is content to it'll raise serious questions, rather. If the youth is content to abandon his previous associates and to throw in his lot wholeheartedly with the rulers, he may, after suitable tests, be promoted and otherwise accepted into that society. But if he shows any regrettable solidarity with his previous associates, that is, the ordinary people he was born amongst, already a caste system here, the rulers will reluctantly conclude that there is nothing to be done with him except to send him to the lethal chamber. That's from Bertrand Russell in 1931 from the Scientific Outlook. The rest of the quotes from The Impact of Science on Society. But the end conclusion is the same, that the rise of the scientifically managed class of technical and elite rulers has already long ago reduced ordinary people and our role in society to very close to nil. We still have bread and circuses, other enjoyments. We have the leisure and access to computers and modern technology, but the true controls are steered by the elite managed foundations, and we have a serious quest ahead of us as the rise of machines makes that elite disparity even worse for ordinary people. But the important thing is it still matters that we stand up, fight back, and say no. Obviously, they still care what we think because they're spending billions and billions every year to form our opinion. And if the mass of society were to reject that opinion, although they already dominate the goings-on, they would be challenged significantly, and we could still fight back. It's not too late. Infowars.com.